Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and I am here to introduce you to college admissions representatives and other professionals in the field of college admissions. Our purpose is to serve you, the students and parents, so that you may gain insight straight from the people who ultimately make the decisions. Regardless of whether you apply to a particular school being highlighted in a given episode, you should listen to all of them, as each guest will give you tremendous insight and advice on every aspect of the college admissions process, prompting you to come up with your own follow-up questions for when you visit campus or meet with a college admissions representative yourself. Don't forget to visit our website, www.collegeadmissionstalk.com, or the show notes of each episode to access the alphabetical list of all the colleges available with the related audio link to the right of each school. The alphabetical list provides you with on-demand access to all of the episodes so that you may listen whenever you wish. And if you want to receive links to episodes before they are released on the podcast, along with other related resources, please fill out the email opt-in form also available on our website and in the show notes of each episode. Lastly, please email me with any questions or comments at collegeadmissionstalk@gmail.com. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Anna Rossi, who is a senior admissions counselor at Merrimack College in beautiful North Andover, Massachusetts. Anna, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It is our honor and pleasure, and we're excited to have you here. So, Anna, let me ask you, what is it about Merrimack College that sets it apart from other institutions, and what aspects of the university do you believe makes it attractive to so many prospective students?
Absolutely. So like you mentioned, Merrimack is up in North Andover, Massachusetts. What I like to say is we're a traditional New England campus. When you imagine a college up in New England, Merrimack is similar probably to what you're picturing. We're about 4,200 undergrad students and about 1,600 graduate students. So we're medium-sized, which is great. I say we have the best of both worlds because the school is small enough that students have an amazing relationship with their professors. Our average class size is 22 students. We don't have any large lecture halls on campus. All of our students really get one-on-one attention from their professors, as well as their academic and career advisors. And at the same time, the school is big enough to have 100 academic programs, so there's definitely something for everyone. Many of our professors are engaged in research and pull in our undergraduate students to work on these projects with them, which is an incredible experience. And of course, we have Division I sports on campus, which brings another level of excitement to our community. We are an Augustinian Catholic school, one of only two in the U.S. So we do have our Catholic roots, but we have a diverse student population with students from all backgrounds and religious affiliations, or students with no religious affiliation at all. And we really want students to make their experience at Merrimack their own. That could include studying at one of our new combined majors, studying abroad, completing internships and co-ops. This year we're welcoming our first class that will be a part of our Warriors at Work program. And what that is, it's for most of our business majors or engineering majors, some of our science and psychology majors. These students will be completing a 6-month paid co-op during their junior year. So that's huge for these students to have the opportunity to work at a company and get that experience. And a lot of students who we have that are currently completing co-ops, just not through this specific program, get job offers from their co-op right from graduation. And I would be remiss to not talk about the outcomes of our students. Our career advisors are amazing and work with students right from their first year with finding shadow opportunities, internships. We do guarantee internships for all of our students during their time at Merrimack, and 87% of our students complete an internship during that time. And for the class of 2022, 96% of our students were employed or in graduate school within 9 months of graduation. So we definitely have a pretty good outcome rate as well.
Well, that's a tremendous overview. I'm just going to repeat some of them. You're a mid-sized school with 4,200 undergraduate students. The average class size is at about 22 students, which is amazing. That's actually smaller than many high schools out there. And of course, you mentioned that you have no lecture halls, and it sounds like there's really something for everyone. Research opportunities, Division One sports, study abroad. I love that Warriors at Work program. And then you talked about your internships and your career placement programs, which sound phenomenal. So again, we really appreciate that overview, Anna. So what qualities or characteristics does Merrimack College look for in its applicants beyond just academic achievements?
Absolutely. So we really try to have a holistic approach when we're looking at our applications. We want to look at the entire student, not just the test score or not just a grades that they got in class. We're actually test blind. We have been for years, so we don't look at ACT or SAT scores at all during the college admission process. We do really want to see what students are involved in. What have they done during their time in high school that they're proud of? Maybe if they're sharing the clubs that they're involved in. I also always like to point out that having a job in high school is something to put on your college application. We want to see that you're committed, that you're bringing things to the community, that when you come to Merrimack, you're going to be doing those same things, which is something that is important to us. A lot of our students are incredibly involved. We have over 60 different clubs and organizations on campus, and we want to see what this next group of students coming in is going to bring to those clubs and organizations now and what new things they're going to bring also.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you talk about your holistic approach to the application review process. The fact that you are test blind, which of course means that you do not look at SAT or ACT scores. That's something that's not considered at all in your overall review. But what is important is involvement outside of the classroom. In addition to, of course, reviewing the transcript, which I'm sure you look at, that involvement outside of the classroom is huge in your review, especially if you hold a job, which I really appreciate that you mentioned that because it's the reason why they might not be involved in 7 or 8 or however many activities like a classmate might be. So again, Anna, we really
Absolutely.
appreciate that. You touched upon a lot of it already, but could you walk us through your general process of how applications are reviewed at Merrimack, including the key factors you do consider when evaluating applicants?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we do, which many colleges do, is we do recalculate students' GPAs. So we get students' transcripts and we look over the class they took, the grades they got in those classes. And that's important for us just because we want to make sure everyone's on a level playing field. Different schools calculate GPAs differently. So we just want to make sure that when we're looking at two students or we're looking at a group of students, if they all have a 3.5 GPA, it's been calculated the same way. So we start with that and then we go on to reading and looking over the application. So looking at what the students submitted, like I said, their involvement, reading over their personal essay. That's one of my favorite parts, just getting to know a little bit more about the student's personality. And then we have all of our students submit one letter of recommendation, which is another favorite part for me to read over to see what a teacher has said about them or a counselor or another member of their typically of their school has shared about getting to know them and knowing their experience. So that's kind of how that process goes. And like I said, we really look at what has a student been involved in or how is their character going to transfer over to when they're a student at Merrimack.
Well, we appreciate that. Again, you look at the transcript or the GPA to determine number one, can they do the work? But again, you're looking at what they do outside of the classroom to determine the type of community member they're going to be once they're on your campus. So, in terms of your review, you mentioned that you recalculate GPAs. That's to level the playing field, as obviously you're receiving applications for hundreds, if not thousands, of high schools throughout the country and beyond. And you mentioned your favorite part of the overall application, which are those essays where you really get a chance to hear the student's voice. So, is there an essay that you could share that really stood out? Something that you thought, wow, this is a really unique essay topic, and something that you would want to share with us, just as an example?
Yes, absolutely. An essay that I absolutely loved reading was about a high school student who took care of one of their grandparents.
Hmm.
And they talked about the fact that their relationship with their grandparent had really changed over time, from the time when they were a young person and their grandparent cared for them to when that role switched. And they really talked about the switch in that role and what that meant for them. And now going off to college, reflecting on how that relationship had shaped them over time. And I liked it because it wasn't necessarily about an accomplishment they had or about something exciting or something maybe potentially heartbreaking that happened to them. It really shaped their character, and it's something that I wouldn't have read or seen in the rest of their application if it hadn't been for that essay.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that because some of the reps have shared that students many times do talk about a grandparent, but at the end of reading the essay, they want to accept the grandparent and they've learned nothing new about the student. But I really appreciate how you're talking about it was the relationship that this student had their grandparent when they were younger and how it switched over time. And the student, obviously, based on what you said, talked about how it shaped their personality, perhaps their thought process, and what it really meant to them. So, to your point, it gave you great insight in terms of who the student is as a person, their character, which is not so simple to find in other parts of the application. So, it's very important, students. We say it all the time. The transcript are your grades, the activity sheet, what you've done outside of class, but that essay is your voice about yourself to talk about who you are, your thought process, your personality, and it needs to build upon everything else in your application. It shouldn't just repeat, your grades that are simply on your transcript or what you've done outside of the class, which is in your activity sheet. So again, we really appreciate that example, Anna. And I know that Merrimack has 5 schools. Does the application process differ when applying to any of your schools in terms of having to submit additional materials for a specific program, or does the application process differ in any way at all?
Yeah, so we do have five schools. The application process is similar for all of the schools, and we're also pretty flexible with students when they want to switch a major, if they want to do that before they've come to Merrimack or during their time at Merrimack. The only major that I'll point out that is slightly different and is the only major that you can't transfer into at Merrimack is our nursing major. So our nursing major is direct entry, so students begin taking nursing classes right in their first year. And because it is that 4-year program, students aren't able to transfer into it. So I always say if you think you might be interested in nursing, or if you're deciding between nursing and biology or nursing and health science, definitely apply nursing because it's easier to transfer out of nursing than obviously you can't transfer in. And for our nursing majors, we do typically look for students to have 4 years of math and 3 years of a lab science, which isn't something that we're necessarily looking at all of our applicants for. And I also wanted to point out that for students who come in undecided, they'll be a part of our Discover program, which helps students with making the decision about what they might want to major in. So they'll meet with academic advisors right away, and that helps students with getting the opportunity to take classes in different majors right in their first year. So if they're like, oh, I'm really interested in business and biology, they can take a business and a biology class right away. So they're making an informed decision about what they want to major in instead of making just random decision based off what they think they might be interested in.
Well, we really appreciate the overview. And I think I know the answer because you said you're test blind. However, there are some schools where, generally speaking, they do not look at test scores. But for a specific program, such as nursing, which is more competitive, they might. So, for the nursing program, do students need to submit SAT or ACT scores?
No, we're still test blind for our nursing program.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to ask that question because I do think it is a good question for students to ask. In other words, many schools are actually test optional, which means obviously that you could submit your test if you think it's going to help your overall application or not. But all of a sudden, if you're applying to a more competitive major, all of a sudden you might need to submit that test score. So it's a very important question to ask when speaking to admissions reps, whether it's at a college fair or at your high school. So, Anna, the overall number of applications schools are receiving are on the rise. With an increase in applications, how do you determine how many students to accept
or even deny when you don't necessarily know how many of the applicants that you accept are actually going to attend?
Yeah, so this is a balancing act that a lot of colleges have to play, especially as years go on. We don't necessarily know for sure what the trends are going to look like with what students are interested college wise or where students are going to want to go. But we are able to use data from previous years in order to help us with making the decision of how many students to admit, and then, of course, that can change year to year. We do have our early decision and early action deadlines, which happen in November. And that is when most of our students apply. And so at that time, we look through and we're able to admit students there. There are sometimes that we are denying students at that time. And then we also will move students on to a secondary review. And that will help us with looking over maybe if they have some more senior year grades, and our early action, early decision pool is the most competitive students typically applying during that time. So those students that are moved to the secondary review are with our rolling admission students. So we're able to kind of view them on a different playing field than when we're looking at our early action and early decision students as a whole. And we do create a wait list, and we typically start looking at our wait list around April, which helps us with making that decision. But it's definitely a balancing act of deciding how many students to admit, and knowing what's going to happen year after year is definitely can be a challenge.
Can only imagine, and we appreciate the overview. And Anna, when reviewing applications, obviously the transcript is an important piece in terms of seeing how the potential student did academically while they were in high school. And I know that you mentioned that the GPA does, in fact, get recalculated so that you're leveling the playing field. But what are you looking for when reviewing an applicant's transcript, and how does it differ, if at all, based on their intended major or the school within Merrimack that they are applying to?
Yeah, so what we're really looking to see is if a student's challenged themselves in high school, which can look different for every student. For some students, it's taking honors and AP classes and dual enrollment classes and the toughest classes that their school is able to offer. And then for other students, it's taking all college prep classes or the equivalent. And that's enough of a challenge that they've created for themselves during their 4 years in high school, and we've really taken some time to understand when we're viewing a transcript what it does look like for a student to challenge themselves at these different levels. And that's something that I really like about the Merrimack review process, because we're not looking for every student to have taken all of the hardest classes and to have gotten all of the best grades in those hard classes. But we're really looking for at an individual level to see what a student's done during their high school time that's going to show that they're ready for the rigor of a college class schedule.
Well, that's terrific. It's very important, students, to challenge yourselves, of course, based on the context of what's available at your high school. So, speaking of that, Anna, when one student's high school has, let's say, all of the AP or IB courses imaginable, and yet another's maybe doesn't have quite as many, and perhaps there's even restrictions in terms of how many of those courses you could take in junior and even senior year, how does the application review process differ for these students that are coming from very different high schools?
Yeah, so this is a great question. We really take the time when a student applies to look at everything that's come with their application, which includes a school profile. So what that school profile does for us is it lays out what courses the school offers, if there is any of those restrictions that they only allow so many honors classes or so many AP classes, or maybe they're a school that doesn't offer honors or AP classes. And so we really take the time to look over that school profile and see what a student may have taken in relation to what was available to them. And then that relates back to looking individually to see if a student challenged themselves. The school profile helps us with understanding what schools offered in relation to what students were able to take. And we definitely take that into consideration. No student is penalized for not being able to take a tougher class when that wasn't an option for them.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning all of that, particularly the school profile, which again provides a great framework for admissions representatives such as Anna to evaluate your application appropriately. So, students, just a reminder, the school profile, every school has it. It's usually on the website. If you don't have it, ask your school counselor or look on the website, because it's definitely important to see what it is that the admissions representatives are going to see on the receiving end of your application in terms of all of the information that your school profile provides. So again, we appreciate it, Anna. And what support does Merrimack offer its students to ensure that they continue to be successful once they are on your campus? I ask this question not only for the students who may have had an IEP or a 504 plan while in high school, but for all of your students in general.
Absolutely. So I'll answer this in a few ways. The first is our Compass program. This is a program that we created for students that are coming to Merrimack who may need more help with the transition from high school. So this isn't created for students who specifically had any services in high school. They certainly may not have been on a 504 plan or had an IEP, but for students who might have struggled in high school otherwise, so we can ensure that they have the support they need throughout their college career. So it's a 1-year program that students complete, and something that's cool is we've had students that have come out of this program and appealed to be in the honors program during their sophomore year and have been accepted into it. Students who are in the Compass program take 2 specific Compass courses during each of their first 2 semesters. And these courses were designed specifically with these students in mind. They have an even smaller class size, and the professors are handpicked to really work closely with these students. So they have one-on-one academic coaching, peer mentors from students who have completed the Compass program already, and a designated Compass learning space for students to go to and study where they'll have help automatically available. And all of these things are available, all these services, to all of our students, but for the Compass students, it's a required part of the program. So it really makes sure that they're following the steps to be successful when they first come to Merrimack. And then in addition, of course, we have an incredible accessibility services department that's able to help students who had a 504 or an IEP in high school and help them with setting up accommodations, tutoring, anything that they may need. And I also like to point out that within accessibility services, we have an amazing program called Activate. It's a program that's set up for students who identify as being neurodiverse. So students in this program have one-on-one coaching with members of the accessibility service staff. Students in Activate have group meetings and social events, and they've actually created a club on campus called the Group with No Name. And there's members of this group. They do dinners together, but every day there's a member of this group in the dining hall for lunch that has just a Rubik's Cube on the table, and they sit there through all of the lunch hours. So if a student who's a part of Activate is looking for a table to sit at, they know that they'll always have one in there, which is nice because the dining hall can be a little overwhelming, especially when you first get to campus. And lastly, we have a care team on campus. So the care team reaches out to any students who might be struggling socially or emotionally. So anyone, faculty, staff, or students are able to complete a care report online. And the care team then reviews that information within 24 hours, and then we'll take action as needed. So they're there in case, I always like to say, like having an extra set of eyes on you at school, it definitely helps with our parents, with giving them kind of a sense of relief, knowing that this care team is always there and ready to jump into action if need be.
Well, that's awesome. It really sounds like you have supports for each and every one of your students. You talked about your Compass program, your accessibility service department, your Activate program, your care team, where anyone can report a concern online, which I think is phenomenal. By the way, I always put the Office of Undergraduate Admissions in the show notes. If there are any links to any of these programs or more that you want to share with the students and their parents, just send them to me, and of course, we'll make them available in the show notes. Now, I know that you mentioned earlier that you have D1 sports, Division One athletics. So, what about aspiring student athletes, Anna? How does the application process differ for them? And what advice would you provide in terms of making their intentions to play sports in college known?
Yes, so we have 26 Division One sports on campus. Most of them are currently in our Northeast Conference, but we'll be moving conferences to the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. And then our hockey team is not in either of those divisions. They're in Hockey East, which is one of the most competitive hockey leagues in the nation. So that definitely brings a lot of excitement to campus. Naturally, the recruitment process for Division One is pretty competitive. I always tell students that there is a prospect questionnaire on our website, and as early as possible that they think they might be interested in playing a sport or being a part of one of our teams at Merrimack, to fill out that prospect questionnaire. That's the best way to get in touch with the coach. When you fill out the questionnaire, depending on the sport, it asks you for different information. It might ask you for times if you're a swimmer or a runner, or for other, obviously, very different information if you're a football player or a field hockey player. So you're able to fill that out. It goes directly to the coach, and then if they're interested, they'll reach back out to you. And I always also like to point out that we do also have club sports on campus, which as a Division I school are very competitive. They compete against other schools in the New England area and even farther, oftentimes. And then we also have intramural sports on campus, which I say are the most competitive sport because you're playing against your friends. So you might have an 8 a.m. with someone the next morning who you have a game against the night before, and that can be pretty competitive for our students.
Well, it's awesome to hear that you have athletics at every single level. We really appreciate that. And for the students that are looking to play D1 sports or 2 or 3, it's important to always check the NCAA website for the latest information in terms of the rules and regulations. And I'll link that one in the show notes as well. So, Anna, this has been a phenomenal conversation. You've been so thorough and comprehensive. I really appreciate it. But I have to ask you before I ask the last question, is there a question that I didn't ask today or a topic that I simply didn't bring up that you'd like to leave with us now?
The only thing really that I want to point out is that Merrimack has really seen some unprecedented growth in the past 10 years when other colleges have been in decline or have not been doing as well. We've almost doubled in size, have
Wow.
added new programs and countless initiatives. And this is something that I think is important when going and looking at a college is to see what do they have that's new. And we have a new student union on campus. We have a new engineering and computational science building. And we also are building 2 new residence halls this summer. So we're not just leaving an area of growth behind, we're continuing our growth, which is really great, I think, to see at a college that you're considering.
Well, we appreciate that. And again, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Unfortunately, it does lead us to that last question, Anna, which is what are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would provide a student and their parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
Absolutely. Well, my first piece of advice is to go and visit schools. During your junior year or the summer before your senior year, I would say is definitely that time to start if you haven't started earlier and just get a taste of what you like. Small versus big, a city versus a traditional campus. And then most schools do have open houses in the fall as well, but just getting onto campus is going to give you the idea of if this is something that you're interested in or something that you like. I think that going and visiting schools of all different sizes and of all different types of campuses is so important because you might find something that you thought you weren't interested in at all, but you absolutely love. And that could completely change the schools that you're applying to come the beginning of your senior year. And then I always recommend once you get it accepted to go back and visit again if you're able to. Because visiting a school that you've been accepted to is such a different experience because at that point you're actually imagining, could you picture yourself here next year? Are these the residence halls? Are these the buildings that you would consider your home away from home that next fall? My second piece of advice would be to don't be afraid to brag a little bit about yourself in your application or a lot. I think that a lot of times students get nervous about putting all of their accomplishments and of all of the great things about themselves in their application. Put everything in there. We want to see all of the great things that you've done. We want to see the great person that you are. So definitely don't be afraid to include all of that. And like I mentioned earlier with having a job, and definitely include that in your application. Sometimes I talk to students and they're like, well, it isn't really an involvement, but a lot of times that's a huge involvement in students' lives. And my third piece of advice would be to reach out to us. At every school, there are counselors who would love to have a conversation with you. There is no question too big, no question too small. I've answered questions about the dimensions to an inch of the room that they're moving into because these students want to know exactly what they're going to buy, to the big time questions about financial aid, about the internship students are completing, about what the individual classes are going to be looking like. We love working with students and families. That's why we do this job. So we want to help you with making your decision.
Well, those are tremendous pieces of advice. And obviously, Merrimack is so lucky to have you on their team, as were we throughout this episode. You were awesome. I do hope to have you again, Anna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. It was such a great experience.
The pleasure was truly all ours. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care, everyone, and best wishes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP.